play was one good way to do it. And what it gives us is it gives us a unique selling point. The first thing is that when we wanted to put it onto Live Arcade, actually the process for us was really, really easy. Microsoft just liked it straight off. We still had to go through the full green light process, but we had no hiccups whatsoever, and that's very unusual. We expected it to be a nightmare, to be quite frank. Again, once we started development on the game, and we thought, right, we should want to get some press early on so people know what the game's about, so we can get some feedback. We actually found it easier than we expected in terms of journalists really, really wanted to come to the office and see the actual models of what we'd done, or wanted to receive the photos, wanted to hear about how we were actually making this stuff, because there was something special about it being physical. So when it came to trying to get some press for our game as we're developing it, we actually managed to get a two-page entry into Edge magazine last year, or even before last year, which is quite unheard of for a game at that stage of development from a small independent team. Since that time, what we've also done is we've tried to bring in, just start bringing in a few evangelists and ground troops, essentially, who, when the game gets closer to release, who will then talk up the game. And what we've done to do that is we submitted our game to something called the IGF. The IGF is, they basically do some independent game awards, and at GDC every year, they have a big red carpet event which comes before the main awards. And in addition to that, if you are nominated, you also get to show your game for 3 days on the GDC show floor. We submitted Cletus, even though it was quite an early build at the time. We were lucky enough to get nominated for Visual Excellence. And what we found was, as a small company, it's very difficult for us to try and get in touch with lots of different journalists and do press. But when you get nominated for a major award, all the journalists are looking at those award sites and they want to know about your game. And when you go to GDC, what we also found was obviously people come around your stand, and GDC being an industry event, you get all the journalists coming around to your stand, and they can see you, they can meet you, they can talk to you. We actually went and bought some plasticine when we were there. We didn't take it there because we thought customers might get upset and think it's explosives. So we actually took plasticine with us when we were there, and we had people modelling clay there, giving demonstrations, and allowed journalists to also make their own stuff. And as a way to get interest in your product from both press and from sort of interested students, it was fantastic. And those press we're still in touch with now, and they still like to hear what we have to say, and we'll start ramping up later in the year when we want to do sort of press when it comes towards release time, which will be sometime next year. So for us, the proposition was very much about having a property that had something very, very unique about it. And our challenge now is to take what we've got and get those ground troops fully mobilised when it comes towards release time. And that's going to be a new experience for us, I have to say. But in terms of the approach, I think for small companies, you've got to have something really, really unique in order for you to sell it. I see a lot of products, as I do consultancy for publishers and other companies, I see a lot of products where when I'm looking at them, they could be from anyone, from anywhere, and I don't see how they're going to stand out. And I think that's my lesson to any independents is, if you want to self-publish, if you want to do something new, make sure you've got something that is different. It's got to stand out. I'll finish off just by saying that the future for us with doing something like this is it's a niche that we can go and grab. No one else is making stop motion games because they're, to be truthful, very, very difficult to make. But because they have a very unique look, and they have a look that appeals to all ages and all genders, we've already been approached by numerous companies about branding opportunities, about doing educational games, about doing follow-up games. And for us, we think it could be a really, really good niche for us to work within. That beforehand, we simply wouldn't have been able to do this sort of thing. So as a proposition for our company, it could give us a very, very solid future. That's it.
Thanks, Alex. Great. Well, as I say, I'm standing here in place of Martin Brown. So obviously can't match his boyish good looks or his drinking capacity, but I'll do my best. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about Revolution, to put it in context, and then use Broken Sword as a case study in how we approach the marketing and ultimately what the results were. So put it in context, Revolution was founded in 1990. We grew to about 30 people by 2000, which was exactly the wrong size. It was quite clear at that time, and it's even more clear, and indeed Colin Anderson sort of echoed the fact that ultimately you either need to be large or small, because as a developer, if a project is cancelled, if you're small and you have a low overhead, you can sustain that. And if you're large, you can move people around. But if you're just doing 1 or 1.5 projects, then ultimately you're screwed. And what happened in 2004 was indeed a major project was cancelled, and we shrunk right down. And we now work on what other people call the Hollywood model, and that's basically the idea of bringing freelancers together and working on a collaborative basis rather than having huge numbers of staff. And that works really, really well, because ultimately we can collaborate with people on a much better relationship from a creative perspective. Also, against us was the fact that our project was exactly the wrong size as well. Ultimately, it was that to write an adventure game is sort of mid-priced, and it was too large to be incidental to a publisher, but then too small to ultimately be something that could earn them huge amounts of money. So, you know, the games would typically earn about $20 million. And, you know, for a publisher, they wanted games that were more risky, but could ultimately earn $100 million. But the big thing that we did manage to do was retain our own IP. And, you know, that is really pivotal to what we've been able to do since. And the last time we actually earned royalties was 1997 from Sony, when we licensed them Broken Sword on the original PlayStation. And those were the days when actually royalties weren't just a myth, the sort of things that you told your children at bedtime. You know, when I were a lad, once upon a time, we actually earned royalties. But the big sort of turnaround really came in 2008 when we signed Broken Sword, a director's cut, which was based on our original Broken Sword game, to Ubisoft on DS and Wii. And bless them, they licensed those two formats, and that was it, and put no restrictions on us whatsoever, which was fantastic. And you know, they were very, very fair. They are an excellent publisher. And this coincided with the sort of meteoric rise of the iPhone, obviously. And you know, clearly, we have our own properties. It was obvious that actually we should start trying to exploit them. Our first toe in the water, dipping the first toe in the water, was one of our earlier adventures, Beneath the Steel Sky, which we released in September 2009. And the game was very well received and sold well. Basically, it was pretty widely said that the interface was miles better than Monkey Island, which was nice to be compared to something so favorably to a game like that. And then we went on to release Broken Sword on iPhone in 2010. And going forward, we're developing original games and to exploit in the same way. And we plan to bring our other adventures as well. So it's a really, really exciting time for the company. So to talk a little bit about the marketing, as has been said by others, the idea of the template marketing, where you have this really impressive looking document, which when you do a new game, all you do is you scrub out one name and put another in the place and move the dates around, which is really what has been happening, is just so far gone. It just doesn't work in that way. What you really need to do is a new way of marketing, and either you spend millions of dollars, as Nintendo did with Professor Layton, and really bulldoze the property to a casual audience, or you do it a cheap way. Now, looking around the audience, I suspect that most of you are probably more interested in the latter. So what I'm going to do is talk about the cheap way and how we did it. This was our approach. It's not necessarily right, but what's exciting is that everything is up in the air. There are no rights and wrongs. And I think one of the benefits, the huge benefits of this conference, is that we can share ideas and hopefully people will be able to learn. So if we can play our promotional movie, please, for Broken Sword, and that'll put it in context.